Integumentary system. Mostly the skin, all the structures that go with the skin. Organs, this goes back to chapter 1. Organs are body structures composed of 2 or more different tissues. So tissues build organs. And they're going to perform specific functions. The skin is considered an organ. So honestly, the skin is like the largest organ in your body. It covers your entire body. And its accessory organs that we'll talk about make up the integumentary system. So the skin and all that lies within is what makes up your integumentary system. Functions of the skin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a question, Devin?
Oh, they were moving and I was getting scared.
Oh. Functions of the skin. Responsible for maintaining homeostasis, the protective part of it, the temperature part of it, so keeping things in that normal range. Temperature regulation, protection, your skin is the largest protective unit you have. Retard or prevent water loss. It houses sensory receptors. It synthesizes, it produces certain biochemicals. Number 8, part of that process, vitamin D. When you're in sunlight, your skin produces vitamin D. And also very important in getting rid of wastes, like sweat. Layers of the skin. Outside, so epidermis is on the outside. A means not or no in scientific terms. So avascular means no vascular, no vessels. If you scratch on the outside of your skin, it's not going to bleed until you get fairly deep because there's no vessels in the top part of your skin. Keratinized, basically it's kind of like the dead part of your skin. And stratified squamous epithelials that we looked at last chapter. So epidermis is no vessels, keratinized, basically dead. That's why you can scratch the outside and it doesn't really hurt. And very thick layers of cells. The dermis, connective tissue, blood vessels, and nervous tissue all make up the dermis, which is the lower part of it. So the dermis sits under the epidermis. And then subcutaneous, also called hypodermis, underdermis. Sub-Q, like if you go to a nurse or a doctor, they might talk about sub-Q shots. Subcutaneous means under the skin. So basically that shot would go right under the skin. So a lot of your subcutaneous layer is going to be very loose connective tissue and fat tissue. If you skin an animal, including if you go to cadavers and see human skin, that subcutaneous layer has most of your fat is attached to that. Subcutaneous is very important in insulating and preserving heat. I have said before that your body needs a certain amount of fat to protect itself. And a lot of the major blood vessels come from the subcutaneous level. So they're going to come from underneath and reach up into the dermis. This diagram, I'm not going to read through all of it in class, but you need to know this diagram. By the end of this chapter, you need to know this diagram. There are different layers to the epidermis that we'll talk about. The basement membrane is going to be at the bottom. Notice sweat glands, corpuscles. Sebaceous is going to deal with sweat, your hair shaft, your blood vessels, muscle is going to be underneath. So do make sure you know that diagram. Epidermis, made up of stratified squamous. It lacks blood vessels. I already said that. The layer of reproducing cells is the stratum basal. So where is it probably going to be found? Bottom. Stratum basal, also sometimes called stratum germinative. And that deals with germinating. It's producing cells. I typically use stratum basal more often. That's the more common one. It lies at the base or the bottom, and it is well nourished. It's going to have access to those blood vessels so the cells can divide. And here, if I look at the picture, stratum basal is going to be down here. It's this bottom layer of cells. It's at the very bottom. And it does have a little bit more of a purple color if you look under the microscope. So it starts at the bottom, at the base. Cells are then reproduced and pushed upward or outward. As they're pushed upward, the ones that are going up become keratinized, which basically means dried out. They've lost some of their organelles as they die. 4 to 5 layers can be seen then. Stratum basal, stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum, and stratum corneum you're going to find all the time. And then stratum lucidum is found where you have thicker skin. So your hands, your palms, and the soles of your feet. One of my children have inherited dry skin, and they will just sit on their feet and just, rub off a lot of that thicker skin. So stratum lucidum is found where you have thicker skin. Epidermis is very important. It protects, prevents water loss, prevents injury as much as it can, and prevents microorganisms from coming in. Melanocytes. This would be something not so much that deals with protection. Melanocytes produce melanin, which is your skin pigmentation. So melanocytes lie deep. They're towards the bottom of the epidermis and the dermis, and they're going to produce melanin, and that's the part that gives color to the skin. So a dark-skinned person is going to have a lot of melanocytes and produce more melanin. I am a fairly fair-skinned person. I'm not going to have as much melanin as someone else. So melanocytes then pass that melanin to nearby cells through cytokine secretion is what that's called. So this coloring is going to spread throughout your skin. And sometimes this melanin will pool in an area, and you might have like a birthmark. Freckles would be an example of pools of melanin and things like that. Yes?
So when you're like sun tanning, does that make more melanin
Right.
produce?
And during the summer, when you're in the sun, the melanocytes will produce more melanin. Correct. It is a protective feature of your skin.
So when you burn, is that?
When you burn, you've mutated too much. Burning, you actually damage the skin. So it's like actually getting a burn from touching something. A sunburn, you've actually damaged the cells, and that's what causes them to turn red or even blister. So here you can kind of look at a picture. Melanocyte, like we said, down towards the bottom. But then these little pigment granules are going to be spread throughout and in between the cells. Skin color results from genetics, obviously. Environmental, if During the summer, I have darker skin than I do in the winter. And physiological factors such as all sorts of different things. There you can look at freckles, birthmarks, scarring, things like that. All people have about the same number, approximately the same number of melanocytes. It's how much melanin they produce that is mostly different. Genetic differences in skin color result from the different amounts of melanin. The size and distribution of the melanin that it does produce. So those granules that are sent out in different sizes. Exposure to sunlight, UV light from sun lamps, sun tanning, sun beds when you go tanning beds, and X-rays can cause darkening of the skin because that's going to produce more melanin production. Which is also why when I coached in Mitchell, and there was a black girl who was very funny, very outgoing, and she would always tease when we would go to track meets because she's like, I'm not going to sunburn. You know, she did not wear sunscreen. Can someone with very dark skin sunburn?
Yeah.
Yeah, they can, but it takes quite a bit more than someone who is fair-skinned like myself. So, circulation in those blood vessels also affect skin color. Well-oxygenated blood, a lot of oxygen is going to give your skin a pinker color. And when that blood gets closer to the surface, like when you're hot, it's going to give it more of a pink-red color. Poorly oxygenated blood gives a term called cyanosis, which is low oxygen, and then it's going to have more of a bluer color to it. Yellowish skin color, we don't notice this as much in adults, but babies, you will notice this. If you feed baby, like sweet potatoes, have that orange keratin color to it, and you feed them a lot of sweet potatoes, their skin and fingernails will actually turn a little bit of an oranger color, just from all of the keratin that's in it. Or cyanosis, people who have liver disease or very poor livers will get almost that greenish color to it. It's a different color tint. And that's caused from basically kind of a poisoning to your blood. I'll stop there.